on Satura's Black History Corner come on at 3:30, and that's every 2 weeks on the second and fourth Mondays of the month. All the programs here are quality programs, and I know you are enjoying the other programs that are aired here. And we're going to continue to air here as we begin to grow and expand. As I see the expansion already in this studio office here, where we have, I'm looking around, I think there's a camera over here. To locate the cameras that's on, I can always tell because some of the lights are off, but there's so many cameras here right now, you go overwhelmed by which one is on. That's good. That's a good habit. That's a good problem to have because I can remember 6 years ago when I started, you didn't have any problem finding the cameras right there at the center. One of those small cameras. I've got these big cameras in here, and you can tell that we've made some progress since I've been here. Not that I brought any of the progress about, but we certainly made progress, and I can see just in how many cameras we have in the studio. And want to thank our technicians behind the scene, one of whom is John Wilson, who does a good job making sure the quality of sound is always what it should be for a studio of this magnitude. And these persons work behind the scenes. They don't get any credit. We need to have one of those programs there, and in fact, at the end of the show, it runs the credits down and who's the ones working behind the scenes, because we sit at these chairs and get all the accolades and all the kudos as if we're doing the job all by ourselves. But I know who works at the studio 9 to 5 and who make sure this is able to go at the appropriate times. I don't want to at any point act like I'm anything other than the host of the program called What's Going On. And we don't have a person behind the scenes working very hard to make sure this program can be produced along with other programs. So anyway, welcome aboard, and we're going to be here for another hour, and we think we have some good topics to cover here this afternoon. I have to always refer you back to Facebook, because I spent an inordinate amount of time on Facebook, and my reference base is pretty much along the lines of whatever's occurring in the news. And as I was coming to the studio, as a matter of fact, I didn't want to mention this breaking news just was being reported as I was coming to the studio. I heard about it about an hour ago, I think. It was about the situation taking place in Navy Yard in Washington, where we had another shooting on a base, and the different reports on that person been killed, different ones that were wounded. I think the latest count was 12 that were wounded, and the number of persons that were killed is still being disclosed. We don't know the numbers at this point. But it just raises question about the security of our military bases. This was a naval base, but it just reminds me of the fact that we had shootings at our military programs, at our buildings where our military is housed. And I don't know all the details, and I'm waiting as the networks that were reporting this morning are waiting to find out what the evidence is. But we are really having a lot of situations developing at the places where we have to have our defense. And we cannot defend this country if we cannot identify who it is we're fighting and where they're located. And if they're located within our own military apparatus, we got a problem here. And we got to root that problem out. And I'm just really waiting to see what the information is. I don't want to jump to any kind of conclusions, but we have a problem here. We have people that we are, in fact, training to go off and fight the enemy abroad, because that's what the military does. It secures the nation's independence and sovereignty from the outside aggressors, and that is something that you would pretend, at least pretend that then the enemy is in the one that is external to your country. You don't expect to have the military being set upon by those that are inside the country, and also that are inside the military, since we have the enemy on the outside trying to bring this country down. And to have an enemy that is inside the country, not only inside the country, but also inside of the military bases that you have in the country, then that is a problem. And we've got to come to grips with it and resolve it. We can't have our military personnel on any level, whether in uniform, out of uniform, having to worry about the security at the Navy Yard on the military bases. That just can't happen. And we've got to do a better job of screening. I do understand one report was that on the Navy base in Washington, I'm sure this is pretty much the routine everywhere, given that we have to be secure, even in the on the military, where we have people that are trained in defending themselves and defending the country, that you have to have certain ID to get to different parts of the base, even come on the base. And in this Navy Yard, I understand one person was reporting that you have to go through a very rigorous security routine to get through. And so whoever these persons were, and they have one report is they killed one person, and that they might be looking for two others. But whatever the facts are, the routine, according to one report, was that you have to have gone through certain measures to even get on the Navy Yard, and whoever therefore pulled us off had to have had credentials, from what I have been able to discover at this point. We're waiting for the evidence to come out, and we'll see what the final results are. One of the reports we had was that they were reluctant to give out the name of the one person that has been reported to have been killed in the incident. And I think that's the right thing to do. Just wait until we have concrete evidence about what occurred, and then we'll go from there. I want to talk about three different topics this afternoon. One of which is the topic that has to do with something that happened yesterday, and related to civil rights, the civil rights movement. And then we'll talk a little bit about Syria, and then we will finish up maybe with some other information about the international situation that's taking place around the terrorist situation we're facing in the country. But let's start out with what occurred yesterday, so we can bring you up to speed about that, which I wrote about on my Facebook wall, where I was writing about I had put some random thoughts in the Facebook this morning, dealing with the topic of civil rights and random thoughts in Syria, and I said and random thoughts on everything else that's going on in the world. But I want to talk about what occurred on the 5th anniversary of the incident that occurred from the place where I'm from. I'm from Birmingham, Alabama, originally. But I was in Detroit when this incident I'm getting ready to report on occurred. I was in Detroit. And this incident occurred on the 15th of September, 1963. So the 5th anniversary of the incident, which was the shooting, not really the shooting, it was the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church, which I'm very familiar with. It was very close to the school that I went to when I was going to high school in Birmingham. And it was a bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church on the 15th of September 1963, where 4 little girls were killed and some others were injured. I think one person was at the church yesterday in the commemorative ceremony that was blinded in one eye by the bombing that occurred. And one of the girls that was killed, there were 4 little girls that were killed. One of the little girls who was killed was a friend. Her name was Denise McNair, was a friend of Condoleezza Rice, who, as you know, later on became the Secretary of State under George Bush. And if the full story had been told, that would have been mentioned as to indicate that we're not back in the time period of 50 years ago. We're just simply bringing reference to it because that should not be forgotten, but we should add, but it should also be mentioned that since that time, these are some of the things that have occurred, that this price was paid, but it did not, it was not in vain that these incidents occurred. There were changes that were brought about, that we don't have to go through those things today under that particular duress that was the case during that time period. But I don't think that's what the intent was. And I wrote about what I think the intent of these nostalgic visits back into the past to call attention to the way things were, the way we were, but not the way we are right now. And they had, they had Eric Holder there, the Attorney General of the United States, who I call on my Facebook wall Mr. Grievance himself, who is shouting his grievance from the rooftop of the state of the Justice Department as the head of the Justice Department, because he's the Attorney General of the United States, and for him to embrace grievance is quite a phenomenon in and of itself, because we have, some people are claiming grievance from the most powerful positions that they have anywhere in the world. And how you climb under that rock is really amazing, because that should be celebrated that this happened at that time period, but there should be some but that follows it to make it clear that this is not where we are right now, so that we're not encouraging people to be overwhelmed by that which no longer occurs, but acting as if it does occur, because what you do is plant an idea subconsciously that those incidents are still happening right now, which I think some of it is the intent. As I wrote about on my wall this morning on Facebook, I was saying that one of the intended consequences, I think, and I do think it's intentional, one of the intended consequences, and I pointed out two of them, is to go back into the past and put it up to the present. And then by making some use of it, make it appear that the things that we fought back in that time period, we're talking 50 years ago here in this case, that we have to still fight against those things at the present time, when all of those things that we were fighting against back in 1963 and in the 1960s, every one of those problems has been resolved. And I will even go one step further and say that the civil rights movement ended in 1965, and I'm probably the only one in the country that's actually saying that. But I'm saying it based upon the evidence of the record and what the civil rights movement is really about, which I can hardly believe that 50 years later, that, and this 50 years later, I have a dream speak by Martin Luther King, that 50 years later, it cannot be by accident that we have not yet identified what the civil rights movement was really about, that started with Rosa Parks in 1955, and we sat on that bus on December the 1st, and was sitting in the front of the back of the bus. Wasn't sitting behind the bus driver, but sitting in the front of the back of the bus, around the 10th seat, on the right side of the bus, not on the side of where the bus driver was, but they have a now riding behind the bus driver, which is a change in history. Where she was sitting was on around the 10th seat on that bus, in the section which was assigned to blacks under the segregationist laws of the state of Alabama. And in Montgomery, I don't think they had a sign on the bus, but it was just known that the tradition was, the custom was, that blacks would start in the back of the bus and come forward, and the whites would start in front of the bus and go back in their seating. And she got on the bus and went to the area that was assigned where blacks should be sitting, but the bus filled up, and there was a white gentleman standing, and blacks were seated. So in the seats, they were right there in the very front of the back. They asked the four persons, there were two on this side, two on the other side, they asked those persons to go up to their seats. Because the idea was that if you are sitting in this section, and there's a white person sitting here, then the person sitting across from him could not sit on the same level as the white passenger. So they had to get up and accommodate this one person for a seat, and all four people had to get up. Three of them did get up, and the only one that did not get up was the one who was sitting in the aisle seat, Rosa Parks. There was a gentleman sitting over there by the window. And when he got up, finally, when the bus driver kept telling him to give up those seats, and I mean to tell all of them 3 or 4 times to do it, because they knew they were not violating the law from where they were sitting. But anyway, 3 of them eventually did get up. The 2 over there on that side got up and left and went to the back. And then the gentleman stood up, and he stood up. Rosa Parks put her feet out in the aisle, let him by, and then when he came out in the aisle and went to the back, she slid over by the window. And started the civil rights movement. And that was, and as I said, that the reason why I say the civil rights movement is over, and this is very close. because no one has yet recognized what this movement was about. And I can't think this is by happenstance or by accident. I just think people have consciously and deliberately decided they're not going to talk about what this movement was really about. But what this movement was about was not, in fact, transforming the whole South. If the whole South was made up of races from here to Kansas, it was basically a movement to get the politicians out of the way. And that's why I say it ended in 1965, because when the politicians out of the way is the right of those persons they were actually denying their rights, give them the right to vote, and that would change that paradigm. That's what really happened in 1965. Waters is one of the most vigorous opponents of integration. One of the most staunch segregationists changed his mind. It wasn't because he went to church. He changed his mind because those persons that had been denied the right to vote, because no one wanted to listen to the claims made in the 50th Amendment, which was passed as early as 1870, which denied anyone the right to keep people from voting based upon race, nationality, previous condition of servitude, but they did it nevertheless. And so that was discarded, although it's in the Constitution of the United States. And then they passed other civil rights bills in the aftermath of the 50th Amendment, which should have prohibited anyone from being discriminated against as far as voting. And this was not about this bogus claim they have right now, where the claimant's matter is in fact injured because they're telling you have to have an ID. When everybody should show some ID to go into the polls and vote, make sure the person whose name's on that roll is in fact the same one as voting. There's nothing prohibitive about that and nothing discriminatory about it. You should in fact prove who you are at the polls. That should be what black folks should in fact claim as one of the things we're fighting for, because we don't want anybody suborning the right to vote of the person on the roll, because we died, blacks died for that, and therefore the sanctity of the right to vote should be protected first and foremost and defended by those who paid the highest price for it. And the person to tell me is I was told in a seminar where I had to stand up there and check. I was at a college seminar and they're telling me that the ID was somewhat a claim against blacks, keeping blacks from voting. I had to object to that nonsense, because I know about the grandfather clause, the poll tax, white primaries, and all of that. And you can't bring to me this notion, this noise really, that somebody having to show a driver's license or some other government-sponsored ID prohibits blacks from voting, when blacks went through all of the other things that they fought through to get to the polling place, and now you hold up this ID issue as something that prohibits blacks from voting is a disgrace and insult to blacks. And I said as much in that seminar that I was in when these professors were running that nonsense, trying to make the case that prohibits somebody from voting was an insult. And I said it was an insult. I was insulted by it. I'm still insulted by it. And I told them don't bring that in any place where I said another conference. That went over like a lead balloon. But I meant exactly what I said. Well, the civil rights movement was about moving the politicians back. And what moved them back was the right of black people who had been denied the right to vote, no matter what the law said. The Constitution started out, and then that which came in the aftermath of it, because you had to continue to remind persons that we had the 15th Amendment. So you had this law passed in that year, and Reconstruction was a reminder, and then in 57 there was a reminder, and the person didn't stop. And so in 1965 there was a reiteration of what had already been passed, and the 65 bill was able to stick. Which that's another thing people have not understood. And it stuck because you can't enforce a law unless the ones who are violating can stop the violation, and the ones who were violating were the ones in the South in the party of the Klan, which is the Democratic Party. I wonder if Eric Holder understands this. The party that was in fact doing discrimination was the party he now affiliates with, pointing his finger at the Republican Party. But the party he's a part of, and the one in which Barack Obama was elected in, is a party that was doing discrimination. And you cannot get the discrimination ended and the arrest of the voting rights bills that have been passed, including the 15th Amendment, until the party buys into they must stop doing what they're doing in terms of maintaining Jim Crow policies and keeping people from voting based upon their race or their previous condition of servitude. And they did not buy into that until they get the credit for having ended the segregation practices. That's why it didn't work with anybody else. That's another thing. Long as the Republicans were calling for the ending of discriminatory policies, Jim Crow laws and things of that sort, why would the Democrats pay attention to it if by ending it based on the fiats of the Republican Party, it'll bring more power to the Republican Party? Has anybody thought about that? And so it couldn't work under the Republican Party making that happen. It was only when the Democrats would call for it that it could be ended, because then they could be the custodians of the ending of it and then become the recipients of the benefits of it. And that's what Johnson was talking about, as a matter of fact, when he said that we can get these Negroes, he didn't use the word Negroes, but we'll use it on the air, these Negroes to work for us for the next 200 years. And so far, from 1965 to 2013, that's what we've seen. The last poll was 95% of people that don't study anything, don't analyze anything, and therefore can be led by anything. Those who don't know the past are doomed to repeat its mistakes. If they don't stand for anything, they will fall for anything, and that's what I see going on. But yesterday, the usual suspects showed up at the 16th Street Baptist Church. The minister preached the same sermon was preached on the day in which the event occurred. And then the victimologists came in, and Eric was telling us we will continue the struggle that we had back in the day 50 years ago, and we will continue that. I don't know if he's looked at any of the statistics lately. I mean, the statistics that show that from 1966 to 2010, we've had about between 260,000 to 290 some odd thousand blacks have been killed by other blacks. They ain't bombing no churches to do that. The Klan not rioting and causing that kind of death. This is blacks killing blacks to the extent now that the Klan is no longer the problem. It hasn't been the problem for 50 years. Quite frankly, the problem now is this killing people while they're breathing because they're black by other blacks. And that's 95% of the total that we're looking at right now that is happening under that circumstance. And we have better understand the statistics and begin to deal with the realities we're facing right now, because it's not 50 years ago. We need to talk about 50 years ago. We need to understand that that's just for contextualization purposes. That's not to explain what is happening right now. Although that was the intent of why they go back there and then bring it up to this point to just justify that these persons have not gone home. Ben Jealous, I want to give you a shout out, by the way, because Ben Jealous did say that he is going to stand down as the president and CEO of the NAACP. He said that he wants to spend more time with his family. And he stated that he had told his daughter, I think he has two children, but his daughter's the older one. He told his daughter that he would only take the job on for 5 years. Now, if that was true, his daughter's 8 years old. If that was true, he's talking to his daughter when the daughter was 3. You know, we just got to get, some sincerity in what we say in public, because almost none of the stuff that comes out of these guys' mouths, has any resonance that even remotely resembles the truth. You told a 3-year-old daughter you're only going to maintain the job for 5 years and you'll step down after 5 years is over, but you signed a contract to be there for 7 years, but you only meant to be there for 5 years. What is this? Mason, what's that guy's name that tells Joker, he goes to all these fast, points to show the contradiction in what people say, Jackie Mason. And it sounds to me like it's that routine in terms of someone said they did this because of that, and this was the reason why, and then it wasn't that reason, but really it was this reason, and then who's on first. But that's the kind of nonsense how you have to go through the minefield, get to the other side where the reality is. But none of that's real. Ben Jealous is stepping down because there's no civil rights work to be done. The civil rights movement ended 3 years before King was killed. And that's why Dr. King was down there in Memphis in 1968 when he paid the ultimate price for his commitment to improving the condition of blacks. And certainly, it's also outside the pale of civil rights, and some of it is a lowly employment status of blacks because of the some of it has to do with the skill levels and things of that sort. Most of it has to do with the skill levels. And what King was doing was trying to get the price up of the garbage workers, which was a economic issue, which King had gone off into that area and was claiming that was civil rights. So that's really about the fact that if you do certain things inside the economy, including up to open up your own business, you make as much money as you want to, provided that you have the entrepreneurial skills in order to be in the marketplace. And nobody told the best pound-for-pound fighter of all times, who is without question Floyd Mayweather, that he could not make $41 million up front, which he had to write him a check before the fight even got underway. And he has a chance to make even more money based upon the residual returns, based upon what the gate was. And I understand there were 2 million person paid for that 4 fights that they aired. I was silly enough to pay my $25 out of a $75 price. I went in with 2 other people who paid my $75 to see it. I don't think I'll be doing that anymore because I saw 4 fights, not a single person got knocked out. And I paid $75 to sit there to 4 matches that I thought was quite boring. I don't know why I was up at 2 o'clock in the morning having to watch that, and then the aftermath of the discussion after it was over. But I didn't see $75 worth of fighting, 25 which I paid. But nobody told him he couldn't make the money that he made because that is his skill level and he's getting paid for it. And if you have a skill that is in sports, nobody's barring you from exercising that skill. And if you look in the sports world, I don't care on what court you look at, whether it's a tennis court, a basketball court, or was a football field, you're going to find a disproportionate number of blacks out there based upon the contrast there with the population of blacks in the total population. And so you can't bring that discussion that belongs in 1963 up until this time period and act like the discussion is still germane to what we're doing right now. Because that's not true. And you know, I said on the Facebook that those claims that you make, that are made, that you could even negate having a black president, that doesn't mean anything. That's which is what people are saying. He doesn't. Well, he's just one man. Yeah, but we only have one president, and that president is a black person. That was not something that could have happened in 1963, not because the society was so flawed, but who were you going to run? You know, I mean, a lot of people say, well, the times have changed. Well, okay, who would the candidate have been back in that time period? And don't tell me about the civil rights movement until you understand this, having caused it, because as quiet as it's kept, the South, Barack Obama did not carry the South. And he didn't carry the South. I'm talking about the Confederate States. There were 11 Confederate States. And he didn't carry them not because of race. He didn't carry them because the South has ceased being a Democrat and has now become Republican. There's only one southern state right now that went out in during what's called the Civil War, really the War of Secession, because this is not a civil war like it is in Syria, where they have the combatants inside the country fighting for power inside of Syria. We were fighting a war of secession in the United States. And since that war was in fact fought, with the Democrats being on the side of those who were the disunionists, because they were leaving out of they were leaving because they were frustrated with the tax policy of the United States, the tariffs, and there was a war to bring them back into the union. They weren't vying for power. They were trying to exit out of the country because they objected to some of the federal policies that were in place inside the United States. But since that time, with 11 states going out, each one of those states was run by Democrats, the fact of the matter is that today, only one of those states, that is, to say, Arkansas, has a Democratic governor. All the other 11 Confederate states, the other 10, have a Republican governor. And that's why the discrimination has ended, and that's why really the lynching has ended, because the party that was doing it is no longer in power. Now, I don't know what Eric Holder was talking about in terms of continuing that, which was going on back in that time period, when the party was always calling for the end in the first place, is a party that's now running, that now has power. And don't forget what I said earlier, that the fact of the matter is that Obama did not carry the South. So this idea, and the civil rights movement was a Southern-based movement. So to say that that explains it, did Barack Obama run back in that time period? Who ran? And when you have running candidates like Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton, I didn't vote for them. When you think, I mean, I run Bugs Bunny before you run these guys. I didn't vote for them. And I didn't vote for them because they're not qualified. These persons have held no elective office. And we should learn our lesson really with Barack Obama. Because even though he held elective office, we should have paid more attention to this guy's track record and what he stood for, which is the book by Corsi, book by Dr. Corsi, that wrote a book about it, telling us exactly what's going to happen. A book I finished this past weekend, and this book called Abomination, where he was actually predicting what's going to happen. Everything he says in that book is now being witnessed by the policy of this administration. He said he's going to take the country down and weaken it from within. He's going to bold those on the outside, and that's what he's doing. And so even though he was more qualified than Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton, we should have paid attention to his credentials. But nobody's going to vote for these guys running for president. Who did we run before that? Shirley Chisholm, Dick Gregory. There's no sincerity in that. Shirley Chisholm more so than Dick Gregory, and more so than Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton. But until you get some sincere candidates, what do you expect to happen? Then you're going to claim this racism because they didn't win. We don't know if they would have run a better candidate. Maybe you should have run somebody like in '76, run Edward Brooke, who had won in Massachusetts twice for the senatorial position. And I don't know how much of it was the fundamental unfairness of the American people, because I don't think the American people are fundamentally unfair. I think who's unfair are the politicians. And they still are unfair and have to be, they're the ones that have to be stopped at the present time on other matters. They got into that part of the problems in America at the time when that served their political interests, and were doing things in the civil rights arena to aggrandize and serve their interests and their power. And now they're in these other areas doing things against the country to aggrandize and increase their power, because it's no longer about the jurisdiction, it's about something else they got into. But the claims are the same. And it's not everybody that's doing it, it's just these folks inside the political arena that continue to do things that's untoward and disserve the national interests of the United States of America. And that part of it is unchanged. That's still going on. But to say there was the whole society and that the civil rights movement was aimed at everybody in the country that had a white face is nonsense. And that's also as true about that time period as it was during the time of slavery, where they had out of 8 million people in the South, where they had 387,000 slave owners. And to say the whole South owned slaves and all that, that's a misrepresentation of the country as well, because that wasn't true at all. Now, I think the figure, I stated one figure on Facebook, and somebody corrected me and said it's not that high. I said the figure was about 17% of the South, but somebody said no, it's more like 12%. And I haven't done the math. I did the math in one case, but maybe they were talking about a different time period than what I was talking about. But let's say 12%. But if the greatest point, 17%, that means you got 83% more of the people in the South that didn't own slaves and had no investment in it. And in fact, were kept poor as a result of slavery. Because if if you have slave labor in the South and nobody's getting paid, what are the wages for those that have jobs where they are getting paid? What does slave labor do to their job? It drives down the wages and in fact shortchanges the people there in terms of quality of life. So they're not served by it. And in fact, they're victims of it, just like those slaves were. All those slaves, of course, are more victimized than they were. We're not talking about the real history of the country. We're talking about all these platitudes that have been created around it that confuse us of what really was going on in this nation's past. But if anybody tells me that the whole country's landscape had to be altered because of the problems going on, when much of it was by fiat, and when I mean fiat, by fiat, I mean the politicians passing these ridiculous laws and institutionalizing the policies they put in place so that you could not act otherwise. You know, in fact, it's what Walter Williams says, that if people would have acted in ways which were discriminatory in the first place, then what are the laws in the books for if they're going to do that in the first place and not do anything different? The mere fact that the laws are on the books show that the interactions that they think would have occurred have to be ended by putting policies in place where those particular interactions would be impossible. Because in particular in the commercial field, because in the business world, I can tell you the only color they recognize in the business world, businessmen, is green. And as I said, they also recognize silver. But if you think that a person is going to refuse income in a profit making system, the capitalist system, and that the color of your skin is going to deter them from wanting your money because it's in your hands and not in their hands. When they want it in their hands, whoever hands is in before it ends up there, then you don't understand the system that you're living in, because what drives the capitalist system is profit. And another positive, I'm glad it's run by profit, because profit is what makes it efficient, makes it run efficient. And I'm also glad it's run by greed, because greed makes it run efficient also. And anyone that says that greed is bad is not listening to Milton Friedman, who made the point that, of course, nobody that's accusing the businessmen of being greedy is greedy themselves. It's only those persons that are greedy, not any of us. We all are greedy. I want more money than I made last week, and I want to be able to have more of my nest than I had last. That's why I'm still working after a number of years, which I'm not even going to even get into how many years I'm talking about. I'm still working because I want more than what I have right now, and there's some things I want to do that I can only do with money, and I can't do it with the money I have in the bank right now because it's not enough, and I need to continue to work for more so I can do more, and that is how it works. But in the years that have gone by, let's not get the impression that the country was any more flawed than the countries were anywhere else in the world. And in fact, it was better here than it was anywhere in the world, including in all the countries in Africa. And it's better here now for blacks in this country than it is anywhere else in Africa, where I'm going to be, I think, I'll be on the continent sometime real soon. I haven't made my hiatus annual trek, but we'll probably be doing something like that maybe in a few months. And going there to have some extended conversations for about 2 weeks, as I planned to be there in maybe 3 or 4 countries before returning back to the United States. But I will tell you, I won't find anything better there than I find here in the United States as far as blacks are concerned. We might as well do with the program to understand that's really true. Okay, that's so then it did occur 50 years ago, but we're not there now. And we can tell the rest of the story. This is page 2, Paul Holly. Page 2, let's turn over on page 1. And page 2 is, that was then and this is now. And we're not nearly at that place there. And then when we were back at that place, I just have too many experiences to tell you that most of that stuff is mandatory, made mandatory by law. And I had a lot of interactions with whites in the South who lived we lived around the corner. We on this street, and they were on that street over there. I used to go as a kid, because they had more toys around there than I had than we had in our neighborhood. I used to go around there riding their tricycles. I know they got tired of me because I was over there pushing their scooter with my foot. I didn't know any difference. And I was riding rabbit tricycles in the yards. Parents out there in the front porch looking at us. We couldn't figure out why. I went to the theater. Whites were down the first floor. We were in the balcony, but we were in the same theater. But the law would not allow us to be on the same floor, so we were up there in the balcony, and and that was because the laws were the I'm sure they got on the theater. We're not a matter as long as the whites would not leave. We came down there, but the idea was that as long as the laws required them to get making money on both populations, they didn't have a problem with it. But if it began to hurt their profits, I can tell you right now, they would go to the politicians and stop it, which is what they did with Rosa Parks. Once they started boycotting those buses and segregation stopped allowing them to make money, they went in and talked to those politicians and told them to get off that stick. Because when you start walking, really riding those buses, now there is a fiduciary interest in it, and there's a profit motive behind it, and that's when the Chamber of Commerce got involved and told them to stand down, and they did stand down, and that's the civil rights movement we're not talking about. So that's the civil rights. Look, so Eric Holder down there in Birmingham, and Jesse, you were down there because Al Sharpton didn't show up. Wasn't enough. I guess it was not enough media for both him and Jesse in the same place. And nobody got hit on their head, and George Zimmerman was not down there, so they didn't all show up. But Jackson was down there, and I didn't read anything that he actually says. I don't know if he spoke on the program or not. They mentioned that what Eric Holder said. I'd be interested to find it out. I'll be doing some research to find out if he said anything, or was he in fact kept on the sideline like they did when Whitney Houston died, where he went to the funeral and they kept him on that bench there sitting in the front. He couldn't leave. Kept him up there sitting down for 3 hours or more, and they let him say not one word at the microphone. That was a statement right there. And then when Coretta Scott King died, they had him over on the sideline again to honorary pallbearer. He didn't say anything that on that occasion, which should tell us about how these persons are actually viewed by those in the know about the baggage they actually carry. They don't bring anything to the table. And who both for Jesse Jackson in 1984 and 1988 run for president, never held an elective office. You got to be kidding to call that a matter of racism that they didn't win, as if you're supposed to vote for them because they're black. And if that's your import, then that assumption in and of itself is racist. Because they had a person to come out of the clear blue and walk onto the political landscape and become president without any political office, except the founding point of the nation. We would expect at that point of somebody that comes in without any political office. Because George Washington was the person under the domination of King George III. But now, what you look at is what office that they hold. It's hard to run for president if you're holding an office in the House of Representatives. It's almost like you'd be a senator or a governor, even at that point. And we'll see what happens in 2016. I bet you the pattern's going to be the same, where those running will have the Senate position and or governor position. Let's just watch and see how many of them come off the street. Even as a mayor, let's see Bloomberg do it. And if he doesn't get it, and he got $27 billion, and he doesn't get it and can't run for it, and that's not racism, then why would it be racism if you're not voting for people running for office like Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton? We'll vote for these guys running that charade. They have a chance to become president of the United States, and they can't run and win an office in the local places where they stay, and make that a matter of civil rights. So that's pretty much what we need to know about that topic. And if you want to know more about it, read this book. I keep talking about this book because this is one of the best books that I've read about the true understanding of civil rights, which is written by Ann Coulter. And it's called Demonic. And her other book, just the latest book, which is called Mugged, where she's talking about racial demagoguery from the 1960s to the age of Obama. And this Ann Coulter has a good understanding because she thinks out of the box. She has a good understanding of the civil rights movement, which none of the others have shown. And I think it's because it's willful. Because we understand that the civil rights movement had a very limited focus on what it was trying to do, and that is move the politicians out of the way of blacks' rights in this country, then you would not be able to then subsume the notion that it was all about the flaws of the society in general, and we have to therefore heal the nation from its racial wounds because it was so bad, and this country has so much racial baggage than it does than it is the case anywhere else in the world. When that is so far removed from reality that it's almost like laughable. I mean, laugh out loud over that nonsense. It just doesn't make any sense. I said we have to talk about Syria a little bit, and one of the things with the Syrian issue, again, that nobody else is talking about, that you hear, that you hear, H-E-A-R, here, H-E-R-E, for the first time on FlintTalkRadio.com, and that is the fact that what we witnessed as of last week, when Russia did something that has never been done before in the history of the world, and that is to take over the foreign policy of a foreign country without invading that country. And that's what Russia did in terms of taking over the foreign policies of the United States of America through a coup d'etat of the American foreign policy. That's what occurred. And you watched it with your outer eye and didn't see it with your inner eye, which I think, as I said in my Facebook wall, has something to do with the pineal gland and with cognition and related to the third eye and the CBS eye, the eye of the pyramid and the dollar bill and Egypt, all of that. Okay, let's bring it all in. But the bottom line is, it occurred right before your very eyes, and very few persons actually saw it. But if you were really paying attention, you saw that what happened last week was that after John Kerry made that comment off the cuff to a question that was asked of him, a lady stood up in the audience in London and asked him, is there anything that Assad could do to avoid being attacked with bombs brought to his shores by the United States Air Force, or certainly his military, which is going to be shooting those Tomahawk cruise missiles from about 1,000 miles away and then able to guide them through radar with the accuracy they have now. They can guide these missiles and just pinpoint and hit a dime from 1,000 miles away. That there's anything he can do, and that Assad can do. And off the cuff, John Kerry was put between that proverbial rock and hard place. He couldn't say, no, there's nothing he can do, because it makes you look like a warmonger. So he had to say that, well, what he can do is get rid of his chemical weapons, which he won't do. They didn't hear that part. They put him in earmuffs at that point. And he can decide to get rid of his weapons within a week. But then he said, as a follow-up under his undertone, he said, but he won't do it, nor can he do it. Because how do you go 1,000 tons of chemical weapons within a week's time? It's going to take decades to do that. That can't be done in the amount of time that he was talking about. So, but everybody pay attention to that. What Russia did was then take the faux pas, because it was a mistake on John Kerry's part, to even mention that. And for him to have said it, what Russia did was take the comment that was said off the cuff. Don't forget, it was off the cuff remark. And then elevated it up to the level of the foreign policy position of the Obama administration, ran out along with Key Ban Moon, who is the general, what do you call him, the United Nations, the general secretary, the general secretary of the United Nations, and they both now are going ruha baha with the notion that this now was the statement of a foreign policy position of the Obama administration, ran with that, and then used as a club to beat the American government down from being able to wage war against Syria, plus by doing two things. One, elevating it up to the level of it being a policy position of the Obama administration, at the same time giving Obama a way out of him having painted himself into a wall, which if that had not been removed, that wall he painted himself into in the corner, then he had no other choice than to come out with these missiles in order to protect not the credibility of the nation, but protect his own credibility. And what Russia did was, in fact, provide him with an out so that it ended the possibility for the time being that that attack would occur by taking the cover away from Obama. Which I must add, and I did say this in my post today, is I wrote 10 things that you need to know on Facebook, and that is that it had nothing to do with Syrian gas that are being used, because I don't think Syrian gas was used, quite frankly, by the Assad regime. And I think they have intercepts of the communication that disproves that notion, which is why it's not been shared by John Kerry, the person that was in fact committing treason back in the 1960s and 70s by coming out with a book called The New Soldier that gave aid and comfort to those that were killing Americans on the battlefield, as he was in fact doing what was done by Hanoi Jane Fonda. But now he's as a war hawk, as the Secretary of State. I don't believe anything that comes out of his mouth. I have to say that's a side point. Anything that comes out of his mouth, I'm very askance of. But that's what happened to our foreign policy. It was actually taken over, lifted out of the American government. Not that there's any treason involved in that. Just that they were outsmarted and outflanked by the Russians, who knew exactly what they were doing. Vladimir Putin ran a coup d'etat on the foreign policy of the United States. He outflanked John Kerry and outflanked Obama. If you if you notice, after he made that comment, you will notice that after the comment was made, you'll see where they sent out one of the spokespersons for the Obama administration try to go out there and walk the comments back into John Kerry's mouth, but they went back into that. They had a caveat they're going to use, and they're going to use that to drive the idea that that was a foreign policy. If he gives them his chemical weapons, then no attack will be made. And really, to be honest with you, we won't ever know if he ever gave us chemical weapons or not, because we didn't even know where they're stored. And how do you verify? They were saying, and verify and verify. That's the new standard right now. It's not the one that they had before that, which was belief or whatever it was, but verify. To believe what a person's saying, but at the same time being able to verify it so you know that what he's saying is true. Now it's verify and verify, which is an impossible standard because you can't verify that which you don't know where the location of it is. You don't have the satellites in order to detect all the different places where they store these things. Because some of the stuff is way down in bunkers, and you'll be hitting and missing trying to find which bunker you have to uncover a bus in order to get to where those weapons are. You don't want to release those weapons anyway, because you're talking about chemical gases, and then the whole nation is in fact perished. You can't claim that you're saving somebody when you in fact kill off the rest of the people that are there. I said on my Facebook wall this morning that those who are claiming that the horrors of civil war, which has caused more than 100,000 deaths in Syria, that war, by the way, is humane by the standards that were fought in the Civil War using less technology than we're using right now. But all he had there was a cannon and some of those muskets. You have to push the powder down, and then you have to get it working so that you can mount fire again. Take about 10 minutes. And they were able, in that war, 600,000 Americans were killed. And in the war we're talking about here, which is really a civil war, not a war that should have been fought in a courtroom somewhere, which is where the civil war should have been fought in this country, as it's called. It wasn't a civil war, it was a war of secession, but it should have been fought in a courtroom. But 600,000 persons died in the 4 years of this war, and this war has been going on for 2.5 years in Syria, and there have been 100,000 persons dead. I think we need to close our mouths, because it's hypocritical for us to be talking about a war that in high tech has been fought where people on both sides won't lay down their weapons, where you can stop the carnage, and then claim that this was more barbaric than a war which in 4 years cost 6 times more than the deaths that have been caused in 2 years since war being fought in Syria. If you want to go by the number of years it was fought, then okay, there would be they're on a record of 200,000 in 4 years, well, we in fact would have had 3 times that number, because 600,000 were killed here in that 4 year period of time. That if it goes 4 years, it would be 200,000 at the pace of going in Syria. So I think we need to just quote unquote forego any idea that we're going to be striking in Syria on any level, because I notice what they're doing right now is talking about, well, there's only this percentage of Al Qaeda in the rebel forces. There's not that many. It's this many, as if we should be fighting on the side of Al Qaeda, no matter what the numbers are. The mere fact they are out there in the rebel forces should stay our hand, because what we are saying is that whatever the numbers are, if the numbers are not these numbers but those numbers, then we are willing to go and fight on the side of those who killed Americans on 9/11. What was that about? And how do we justify that? And why are the leaders of this country calling for it? I'll be writing about that in another post, probably before the week is out, because we got to explain that also. And Facebook is my site to do that, so hope you will not only pay attention to what we do here, but also follow the post. We're talking to the public on Facebook, trying to increase the understandings of what it is we're talking about, because we got to deal with something beyond a mere discussion. I do want to say this too before getting off the air. One of the other things I want to mention is I think that we got to join on to the efforts of Mark Levine, who took my idea. I don't have any way of proving that, but I do know that that book that's called Liberty Amendments took up the claims I was making on Facebook, and I said here on the air. You said I think people are listening to what we do here, but in reading Mark Levine's book and looking at the 5-part series we did here on Facebook and what we talked about here on the air at FlintTalkRadio.com, I have to tell you that I think that some of those ideas we were laying out as early as February of this year, now in this book that he put out, I think those ideas resonated, and I said that we got to do something in order to rein these people in. And short a revolution in the country, which I'm not calling for, but I'm certainly calling to rein these politicians in, that we got to, in fact, do so by using the tools that were given to us by the framers of this country. We got to return to our patriotic roots. And even if that means that you get investigated by the IRS, if you put patriotic in anything that you're affiliated with, but we got to return to our patriotic roots and use that which the framers gave us as a tool to hold down power from being excessive in terms of its attacks upon liberty in this country. We do have a tool. And I was claiming that the tool was found in the 5th article of the Constitution, which is what Mark Levine is taken and run with in his book called Liberty Amendments. And he's absolutely right. And we have to begin to look at what he's advocating, and he talks about it all the time in the show that comes on from 6 to 9 here in Flint. And we need to pay attention to that and support that, get in back of it, and begin to push for this, build this movement, so that we can, in fact, begin to do those things that will bring about this salvation of this nation, because we've lost. If we don't do something quick and something that is, in fact, substantive, then we've lost. And we're not just losing in terms of election, we've lost the country, which is no longer exceptional. We're very average right now, because that which made us exceptional was our ability to hold our politicians accountable and get them to follow the rule of law, which we no longer are able to do, as they've actually shredded the Constitution. In fact, the law is what they say it is, because the Constitution has been now pushed to the side. And what they do in Washington Day is they do anything they want to do, because the rule of law no longer applies, and even the Constitution of the United States no longer applies in terms of policies made in this country. So we have got to understand what we are, keep the good fight going, and as we always say here as we close out, want you to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you will never know what's on the side of the rainbow.